All right, we are going to be talking about a lovely recent controversy involving Kanye West and Candace Owens. They were caught wearing White Lives Matter shirts. We will be talking about all of this, what it means, is it bad, is it good, and also Candace's response to it. But before we even begin, I do need to reference some older videos because why not? In terms of why Kanye did it, he did it because he's just fed up with like SJWs and the Black Lives Matter movement. So you can watch this video I made here where I show most of the facts about BLM and horrible things they've done. Because these are important, because a lot of people, when they saw these shirts, like, oh, the shirts are racist. So you need to have a foundation of videos like this to get all the real facts in. Another one here is an older one where I talked about George Floyd as well as black and white victims and who is the real victim and the stats behind them. You should watch this video to learn more about that. And on the exact same merit, this video is about the same thing, where I talk about police stats and victims and all that, tell the truth, and then debunk Hunter Avalon at the same time. And then finally is this video here, because there is a lot of idiots out there who actually believe in white privilege and believe that black people are victimized. And if you have any interest in facts at all, you would know that the opposite is actually the truth. And I have many videos showing examples of white people straight up being attacked and abused and everything bad just for being born white, because apparently it's a privilege to be beat up because of your skin color. Anyway, I have others too, by the way, all across my channel, but I'm only going to reference this one. And an example, by the way, that actually appears in this video kind of relates to the shirts. You see, in this video I mentioned a controversy from a couple of years ago where somebody put up "it's okay to be white" signs in a bunch of different cities, and the point of these signs was because of how much white people have been attacked over the last 10 years or so. So they put up signs to be like, don't worry, it's okay to be white. You're not evil just because you're born white. And then SJWs in the mainstream media referred to the signs as white supremacy. Like, so now it's white supremacy just to be like, you can be white, it's okay, you don't deserve to die. And yes, SJWs actually do believe white people should be killed. So, because we have privilege. Anyway. Calling for death of us because of our skin color is privilege. Anyway, so you'll want to hear that video as well as many others. But now let's get into what truly matters, Candace Owens' response.
God forbid you wear a t-shirt that says White Lives Matter.
I agree. Like, why the fuck does it matter? It doesn't.
Wore this for his Yeezy Season 9 fashion show here in Paris. And people are upset. They're very upset about that. They're going...
Racist people are. It's important to note that SJWs and, I guess, modern-minded people in general believe that you can say that any skin color matters on a shirt or your political terrorist organization, whatever, and that's perfectly fine. It's not racist to actually be racist, but if you're simply saying, actually, white people also matter, it's considered racist to not be racist.
Why on earth? How could you? How dare you wear this shirt? How dare you make a mockery of the BLM movement?
How could you not? There is so much to mock.
In addition to this, in case you missed it on Kanye West's Instagram page, he wrote this: "Everyone knows that Black Lives Matter was a scam.
That is a literal fact.
Now it's over."
Well, it's not over. Black Lives Matter is not over just because you wore this shirt, but I get what you're going for.
You're welcome. That is the only response, or the only thing that he has said publicly.
It's the only thing he really needs to say, but...
about wearing the t-shirt. And you obviously know, if you're watching this, where I stand on the Black Lives Matter movement. In fact, I'm doing an entire documentary to expose the fraudulent nature of that movement and the...
Good, because there's a lot of fraud. Like, holy shit. The documentary is probably like 4 hours. And there's not just fraud. You got to expose the fraud, the lying, the rioting, I don't know. You could cover the dishonest coverage of BLM from the mainstream media. Like, there's a whole bunch of things.
The organization that stood behind it and benefited billions and billions of dollars because they elicited black grief.
And also caused damage to the cities that they rioted in, which the mainstream media conveniently defended as a protest. But if white people do it, it's a riot, right? Because of privilege.
They sold black people a concept of their oppression. They used
A concept, that's right, because it's not actually true.
poorer black Americans as a marketing firm for their organization. And where did that money go? Well, certainly not to
buy mansions.
Black America, and knew that what they were doing was further dividing the masses. I mean, the whole idea here via the Black Lives Matter movement was to make sure that black people saw oppression and saw white supremacy.
Exactly, this is completely true, and I've been talking about this for a long time. I've always been saying that the only way to end racism, and I have an FTR on this literally, is to become colorblind. Black Lives Matter, political movements in general, SJWs, the mainstream media, and the school system deliberately wants to cause division. Things like critical race theory have actually convinced idiots that the way to end racism is to constantly talk about it, push black victimization and fragility, push that all white people are evil pieces of shit, and they believe that that will actually stop racism. I guess in their minds, the logic is, if you make white people feel so guilty, it'll just end. But in reality, and as I've said before and I'll say again, all you're actually doing is causing the race war to continue. Has it ever occurred to you that despite all this insanity like CRT, BLM, the school system, and all this stuff with the mainstream media, racism actually hasn't gone down at all? In fact, over the past 10 years, it's actually gotten worse. Now again, idiots will believe, because they've been brainwashed into believing, that the reason for this is because people are getting more racist. White people, blame the white people, they're getting worse, and Trump this and that. The reality is, the reason why racism is getting worse is because of things like Black Lives Matter, the school system, because they are pushing the idea, they are literally forcing it into kids' minds that you are a victim because you're black. Get angry about it. See that white person? Go attack them. It's all their fault. Go attack them. Go, go, go. And then the white people are being told, you are a piece of shit. Everything is your fault. Go apologize to that angry black person who's going to get even angrier. You see? What actually happens is they are deliberately putting white people and black people against each other. The facts do not actually show this, that we are against each other. But that's what they're creating. They are enforcing division, not stopping it.
Surrounding them and convincing them that if they leaned into this narrative, that somehow their lives would be better. It was a mirage.
Exactly what I've been saying. That's right. It's all bullshit. Convincing black people that they are worthless and can't do anything and will never go anywhere in life and all this shit, but then blaming white people for it is not going to make them better. It's not going to make anybody better.
Actually, that's a word that Ye used during the breakfast too. It was basically a mirage, right? This idea that somehow all we needed to do was burn down our own neighborhoods. All we needed to do was have our youth wearing a George Floyd t-shirt.
That's true, yeah. They convinced millions of idiots that burning down the city you live in will make things better. And it's so funny because they try to play it off like, oh, actually, riots is just the way to get people who don't listen to listen, make noise and they'll listen. Right. Can we just admit that the riots were not really because you thought people weren't listening? Because, let me tell you something. If the riots truly were about things that you're working towards, like trying to get listened to and stop racism and just get your word out, then you wouldn't have followed up the riots by actually rioting stores and stealing things like TVs. So why don't you just admit that it really was for your own benefit? That's the truth.
All we needed to do was loot Targets and loot these expensive stores, and somehow justice would be delivered.
Exactly. Holding up signs and yelling and protesting and rioting is one thing. But when you're using it to your advantage to just steal stuff, this has nothing to do with race anymore. All you're doing is making yourself look bad because you're enforcing the already true stat that most thefts are caused by black people.
And of course it wasn't. There is a deep irony and a sad irony when you consider that wearing a t-shirt has led such a tremor throughout the world, right? A t-shirt that says White Lives Matter, which should be implied, right?
Exactly, and that's true too. So now we're on to the shirt now, and this is the funniest thing because The shirt doesn't do anything. If the shirt affects you, it's your own problem. You see, you've been convinced by the mainstream media and stuff because of how stupid you are that Black Lives Matter is not a racist term, because what they say is that, oh, well, I'm not saying that other lives don't matter, I'm just saying that no other lives should matter until our lives matter too. First of all, your lives already do matter. In fact, they matter more than ours, okay? Black lives do matter more than white lives. And we see the evidence all over the place. Check out the videos that I linked at the beginning of this one. They all prove, without a shadow of a doubt, that black lives matter than white lives. Things like affirmative action, critical race theory, the mainstream media, the school system, everything is in support of them. Despite the fact that black people commit more crimes, white people are blamed for them. And there is a laundry list of disgusting racism against white people over the last 10 years, and it's getting worse every single year. Examples like, I think it was at a DMV or something, and the woman was saying things like, can the white people please leave because you're making the black people feel uncomfortable. Imagine if you reverse that. It would be on the news for years, months. But because it's against white people, no one fucking cares. The Coca-Cola training. Like, these are just a few examples of thousands. And then, while victimizing white people over and over and over again, you're telling black people that they're the victims despite no facts actually showing that. Fucking with police stats, trying to convince them that they're killed by police more, when in reality, white people are actually killed by cops more. The fact that black people are stopped by police less often, despite the fact that they commit 3 times the amount of crimes, like, you have to look at the truth. You can't just use your feelings and reverse all of the stats because you want to be a victim. That's all this really is. Black people have been taught to have a victim complex. That's the real truth. And that's why you've been convinced that a Black Lives Matter shirt isn't racist, even though it is, and you've also been convinced that a White Lives Matter shirt is racist, even though it's not. I will say this, though. I do believe that it would have been better if the shirt said White Lives Matter too. That would be interesting. Granted, it wouldn't work because SJWs would still get pissed off because they don't believe White Lives Matter at all. But the two would help a lot of other people. For example, so it wouldn't help idiots on either side. But what it would do is it would help the intelligent people in the middle, like myself. Because I don't believe in a White Lives Matter shirt or a Black Lives Matter shirt, actually. I believe in an All Lives Matter shirt. Because that's the truth. They do all matter. Despite what SJWs believe, all lives matter, including white people. So if the BLM shirt said the word too, and the White Lives Matter shirt said too, that would actually be amazing. Because you're not just pushing it in people's face like, I matter. Okay, I matter. Because I know it's not implied, but people think you're implying that I matter and you don't. But the word too being in there lets the person know, no, I'm not saying you don't matter. You do. But so do I. That's how it should be.
White lives matter, Black lives matter, Asian lives matter. It should be implied. Yet people...
It should be, but it's not. At least in modern culture.
People are angry and they are being vicious online because they can't believe that we have the audacity to detract from the movement, which is a lie.
It's so funny because people's reaction to it literally proves what intelligent people say, which is that if you are a staunch BLM supporter and you hate white people and all this shit, you're a racist. If you hate this shirt, you're a racist. It's just that simple. So the reaction to the shirt actually proved the shirt right.
Right? Black lives matter.
Had to skip ahead because she basically, throughout the video, is explaining that the whole point of the shirt is to see how people would react to a shirt in comparison to what is actually happening to black people. And she also starts talking about abortion a lot. I don't agree with Candace on her view of abortion whatsoever, so I've decided to skip over that. But check out this part.
We shouldn't talk about that. You know why? Because it didn't have a t-shirt on it. that said white lives matter. You talk about criminality, no one wants to talk about it if you're not talking about a police officer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
People don't want to talk about the fact that black people are slaughtering other black people.
Yep, I've said this before many times, that the highest percentage of crime is actually black on black. But BLM will only protest and riot if a black person's killed by a white person, which, by the way, is the smallest percentage. The mainstream media won't talk about it either because they're trying to push a false narrative and people get pushed into it. You know, I was talking earlier about how white people are being attacked and victimized and all this shit, and I'm obviously 100% right, but let me give you another example, and I've mentioned this before too. Remember, Tony Timpa is a man who was killed by police in the exact same way as George Floyd. In fact, worse. The difference between George Floyd and Tony Timpa was that Tony Timpa was held down longer, and the cops were laughing at him. But you don't know about Tony Timpa because his skin is white. That's the truth.
People don't want to talk about black on black crime. It doesn't matter because we're doing it to ourselves.
Exactly. Check out this fact, she states.
Per the CDC, African Americans are 4 times more likely to be killed by a gun than the overall population. And once again, it's not a white person that is pulling the trigger. It's another black person. We account for almost 40% of all of the homicide offenders.
So that's interesting. That actually went down. Because when I checked the stats a couple of years ago, it was like 60%. No, sorry, I think it was like 55. But now it's only 40. Interesting.
In the United States, 40% coming from the smallest piece of the population. We're talking about, 7% of the population is black men, and they're accounting for 40% of all of the homicides in the United States. But let's not talk about that. In fact, let's call that racist to even acknowledge that truth.
Exactly. I've said it before. Facts are racist today.
Talk about the ills in our own community. That's racism. Let's just move on for it. People love to talk about the incarceration rates, right? Because the incarceration rates allow you to understand the result without ever having to talk about the problem.
Exactly. So I've said this before too. It was in the Hunter Avalon debunked video. I literally pointed out, because a lot of SJWs and him like to say, well, black people are the most in jail. Yes, because they commit more crimes. Like, now the consequence of crimes is racist. Let's see what she says.
Right? You don't have to talk about the equation. I'll just give you the answer. Black men are incarcerated, right? It says here that there are nearly 5 times the rate of black men in prison than white people. Oh, perfect narrative. It must be racism. No, it has nothing to do with the fact that we're the most murderous group in America.
Thank you.
Has nothing to do with that. Of course, 1 + 1 = 2, but let's focus on the 2 and not the 1 + 1.
All right, and for the rest of the video, she basically talks about exactly what you'd expect. She talks about black stats and basically calls out people for being idiots for focusing on a shirt rather than actual problems, and she's entirely right, except for the abortion stuff. So the overall summary here is very simple. If you are against this shirt, but are supportive of a BLM shirt, you're a racist, okay? And over the last decade or so, white people have faced more racism than black people. Check out my videos for full facts on all this stuff. Or you can do what you probably are going to do, which is just stay in denial and call me a racist for saying facts. You know, what else is new? Anyway, in the end, this was basically a social experiment from Candace and Kanye. Very interesting. Oh, and by the way, one last thing. Like I said before, I really do stand by it would be so much better if it said White Lives Matter too, because then you can't really call racism on. I know they will, but you can't, logically. Or just have the All Lives Matter shirt, which is so much better, so much more fair and equal and all that stuff. But yeah, what do you guys think about all this?